Hey, this is Dr. Young, and this is Education 099 College Success at Bossier Parish Community College's Open Campus. Today we're going over Module 7, Marking Textbooks. In Module 6, we talked about reading our textbook, and today we're going to talk about how to mark our textbook. Now, first, let me reassure you that in marking your textbook, it's not if a little does a little good, a lot will do a lot of good. Often we mistake highlighting for learning. That is not the case. If you feel the need to highlight an entire page of your textbook, you're missing the point. Why do we mark? We want to focus attention on important matters that are on particular pages. This condenses the material that we need to focus on for our examinations. Now, it doesn't necessarily eliminate material, but it does raise to the forefront material that we're going to want to focus on. Now, I always have students ask me about rental books and ebooks. Most rental companies do have some concerns about you marking in their textbook. What I have is students who use rental books often first check with the rental company about their policies. I have students that don't use highlighters but use pencils to mark important information, and then once we're finished with that test, they go back and erase any of their pencil marks. Using ebooks, I have several students that use ebooks and have absolutely no problem highlighting exactly what needs to be highlighted and even making marginal notes. So ebooks do seem to be a good source for working in your classroom and at home studying. So let's talk about how you should mark your text. I discussed two different things, highlighting and underlining. I use those as different concepts. For highlighting, you should use a bright color that catches your attention but doesn't hurt your eyes. So when you have to go back and read it and the color is a little glarish, that's a problem. If the color bleeds through your paper, that's also a problem because you may highlight on one side and it's bled through to the other side, and then you can't highlight on that side. Watch for colors that blend. Most highlighter packets come with a yellow, a pink, a green, and a blue. I tell you, when the green dries, it looks just like the yellow. So if you're using the different colors for different purposes, you need to be aware that there can be some blending of colors. I use underlining separate from highlighting. Underlining I use as a first pass. When I'm previewing my textbook, I underline either a blue or a black pen so that I know specifically that I'm asking questions, trying to draw some inferences about the information that I'm previewing. Once I have gone through the book for a preview and I'm reading and highlighting, I use an underline to emphasize things that I have highlighted. For example, in one of my classes, we have to know the definition of a vocab word. The word happens to be language. One of the keys to that definition is that language is a system of symbols. I have the students not only highlight that definition, but underline the word symbols so that they focus specifically on that word. So I use it to emphasize what I've already asked them to highlight. When you're reading through the textbook, you should make marginal notes. Where can you find related information? For example, if you're going through a history book and you find a reference from John Calvin back to Luther, perhaps you should put a note of what page Luther was on if you needed to refer back to that. Or if you see a map that shows the flow of the Protestant Reformation, maybe make a notation of where that map can be found. I make notes about what questions I have, and then if I think it's important, I may draw a little key or put the letters V-I-M, very important, so that I can draw attention to that later on. Now, some things you need to be aware of when marking your textbooks. Beware of complex marking strategies. I mean, just listen for a moment about what I was describing. So you're going to preview and underline things that are questionable or that you want to draw attention to in blue or black ink. Then you're going to highlight in yellow or pink or blue, and then you're going to underline to emphasize in a different color from blue or black. That's pretty complex. Don't use too many colors. Now, here's something that students often do when they go to buy books. They want a used book. I want you to be careful about purchasing used books thinking they're coming pre-highlighted. First of all, when you buy a used book, you have no idea the grade the person used that book made. So perhaps you're getting the book of a person who failed the class. Or maybe you're getting the book of a person who had a different teacher than you did. So the highlighting has no relationship to what you need to know for your tests at all. My books are used repeatedly, and I have students come and ask me, are these your highlights? And I can usually readily tell them whether it's mine or someone else's. And I often tell them, yes, it is, but I would recommend you highlight in a different color. I've actually seen one book that had the same stuff highlighted in 4 different colors that had blended into this atrocious mash. I'm not sure how the student was able to read the text. So be careful of a book that's too used. What should you mark? Here's specifically what I would suggest you look for. Main ideas or headings. English teachers call those the thesis statements. Those kind of guide you through chapters. Supporting details to main ideas. So for example, when we're looking at the English Reformation and it tells us it started by Henry VIII, who are the people that instituted that for Henry VIII? So we're going to have to dig through a lot of verbiage to find Thomas Cranmer, Thomas More, and Thomas Cromwell. So we would highlight those people when we found them. Then specifically, I would tell you you're going to want to highlight any vocabulary that occurs, particularly if it's vocabulary that you don't know or you're not familiar with. I might even go so far as to suggest you might want to set up some flashcards with just vocabulary on them. Marking your textbook. Here's some tips that I would give you. Avoid the used book trap. Yes, I know they're cheaper, but if you get it and depend on the marking of another person, you're actually setting yourself up to make the grade they made. Don't highlight on your first read through the chapter. Remember in Module 6 we discussed this. Your first read through the chapter needs to simply be a preview. I want you to monitor your marking. You always should mark your textbook before you get to class for the lecture, and then compare what you have marked with what the teacher talks about or what appears on the test. Specifically look for if the teacher talked about it in class and you didn't mark it, you're going to want to go back and reread that section. Clearly, that teacher talked about it, therefore it's important to that instructor. Then compare your class notes to what was marked in your textbook. There should be a fairly high correlation between your lecture notes and the stuff you've marked in your textbook. Now, specifically in math and science, you always want to be sure and highlight any formulas that are in a chapter or any theorems or principles and rules that are followed. Learning these things is probably going to boil down to memorization, so you're going to want to be sure that you mark those. That's everything for marking your textbook. There is available a supplemental video in both Module 6 and 7 that shows you examples of how to mark your textbook. Good luck this semester.